Welcome back to another LVO recap. I have with me Will Belden, who won Best in Faction for Space Wolves. Congratulations, Will.
Thank you, Nick. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So let's just jump right in and talk about this Best in Faction list. You have Logan Grimnar as your Warlord, Ragnar Blackmane, Phobos Lieutenant with Frost Weapon, Battle Leader on Thunderwolf with a Pelt, Battle Leader on Thunderwolf with Black Death, 5 Assault Intercessors, 5 Reavers, 5 Scouts, 2x5 Wolfen, 2x6 Thunderwolf Cav, 2 Vindicators, an Impulsor, and a Calidus Assassin.
Yeah, so I mean, the this shouldn't look strange to like anyone who's been playing Space Wolves or who has played against Space Wolves. The Thunder Wolves are like the mainstay of the army at this point. All Space Marine players are bringing the Scouts and the Calidus and um, the Infiltrators. I think kind of a new tech piece for this that I've been playing with is the Reavers. They recently got a big buff with. I don't remember if before they gave you like -1 in the battle shocks, but like that's pretty good. But then the big thing now is -1 OC,
Right, yeah.
and, which is awesome. In this detachment, especially with the Lieutenant Phobos armor, is gives you move, shoot, move. They have deep strike and they can move, shoot, move, and are one of the only units in the game that can do that and then charge.
Yeah.
Um, which is really really awesome. It can really just like it's hard. It's pretty uninteractive and hard to play around for a lot of armies. And the cool thing about this detachment is you have your different sagas. One of them is to put a character on your opponent's home objective. Usually pretty hard to do, but this unit can make it like in some matchups pretty trivial. You can just like do it turn 2, just like there you go, boom, now my whole army has +1 OC, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, it really makes me wonder if GW just forgot to put that in there and is going to fix
Yeah,
it. But take advantage of it while you can.
yeah, I mean, like, it's one of those things where it's super fun, it's super cool. I don't think it won me any games,
Sure.
but, like, it definitely, an opponent having to play around it maybe did. Um, but then, yeah, other stuff in there. The battle leaders on Thunderwolves have been a mainstay of the list. These are the guys that not only give you lethal hits like other lieutenant type units, but then they also give you the once per game Blood Surge, which is really, really good. Less good in this detachment because you have no other reactive moves,
Mm-hmm.
but still, like, pretty
Yeah.
nice to say after you've charged your Thunderwolves right up into your enemy's face that like, well, you can shoot me once, so make it count. Um, yeah, and then just yeah, Ragnar Blackmane, he's amazing. He kills everything he touches, especially with those assault intercessors giving him reroll wounds. And then Logan Grimnard gives his like Space Wolf Wah once per game, which is just one of the most efficient 115 points you can spend in the entire game probably. Doesn't do much else, sadly. I'm sad every time I play Clint, and I'm like, wait, Helbrecht does how much? He hits how hard? And then I look at Logan, and he's just like, he doesn't really do anything afterwards.
Sure.
But he's good. He can deep strike. He can do actions. He hits hard in combat if you ever get him there.
So one thing I noticed, because you mentioned infiltrators, but you don't actually have capital I infiltrators. Did you miss them at all?
Oh,
Screening out the
the
deep
deep strike
strike.
denial. I do
Yeah.
have them.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. It's missing from
yeah.
what you sent me. So,
Oh, is it? Oh,
note to
sorry about that.
everybody: there are also capital I infiltrator deep strike screening.
My fault. Sorry about that.
No
No, they are
worries.
in the list. Don't leave home without them.
Yeah, that was the part that I was like, oh, okay. So I mean, I'm really curious to hear how this went. But okay, all right, fair enough, as expected.
Yeah, no, as expected. Yeah, the mainstay like flex support area of the infiltrators, the scouts, the Calidus assassin that is in every Space Marine list is definitely not absent here.
Yeah, I know. The thing that I do find interesting though is that so Clint took for his 2 shooting pieces, um, Gladiator Lancers, and you went with Vindicators. What was your thinking there?
My thought is that Gladiator Lancers are much better at killing vehicles and like big monsters. For my money, Vindicators are better at killing everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And the Vindicators exist in this list not just to kill vehicles, but also like put the hurt on anything else I need to, like fighting into Deathwing Knights. Thunderwolves don't fight well into Deathwing Knights because they give
No.
-1 damage, and Thunderwolves' whole ability is +1 damage, and those cancel each other out. Um, Fighting into stuff like Death Shroud, which I had to a number of times in this tournament, and Vindicators just eat Death Shroud if they're not making their saves. So they they do the whole thing of popping open transports effectively just like Lancers, but they also can like help you punch into elite infantry and you know anything else that like a Lancer. Great, you have 2 shots. You'll kill 2 chosen with that. Great.
Yeah.
Like a Vindicator, you can pick up half a squad of them by itself.
Yeah. Makes sense to me. All right. Well, why don't we move on to talking about your preparation for LVO? What did you do to get ready?
Mostly just tried to play a whole bunch of games, many as I could within reason. I know like you and Clint probably grinded way more than me, but yeah, just tried to play a lot of games. Tried to play as much as I could into matchups that like knew I hadn't practiced well or were like maybe unfavored in. Like I played Clint like 2 or 3 times with the specific intention of like I know that this army in particular, like because the Thunderwolves can't go through walls because they're so easily move blocked into a melee mirror where the opponent is mostly infantry melee, like it can be pretty unfavored because they can just hide behind walls and wait for you to have to overextend because you need to touch an objective, you need to do an action, and then they just come out and punch you in the face. So I practiced that a good amount. Like I played against Clint, I played against Angel, like some other local people, and that I feel like those ended up helping a lot because I played, as we'll talk about later, like I played World Eaters, I played Melee Death Guard 3 times. I think I think those like came yeah, I think those like reps helped. So I just like playing a lot of reps and then just also like I don't know, experimenting with different lists, stuff like that, just trying to know the ins and outs of the faction and the game better than before.
And I realize I forgot the slide. I mean, what's your experience and background for the this level of tournament? I mean, have you been to a super major before?
I went to the only other super major I went to is I went to BAO back in like 2014, 2015
Okay,
in
long
seventh
time ago.
edition.
Yeah,
And I want to say there was like 200 players there, but
sure.
like it was completely different edition. I was playing an army that like fundamentally doesn't exist anymore because the psychic phase doesn't exist anymore. And I was playing like Zinch demons. So yeah, no, completely different. Yeah, and then I haven't played any really big tournaments in 10th edition other than this. I mean, I played like a couple smaller GTS, and then I played the team tournament up here in Santa Rosa at SonomaCon. But like other than that, no, this is my first really big tournament, like kind of ever.
Mm-hmm. Well, hey, you did pretty well then.
I did better than I was hoping. So that's all I can be. That's all I can be happy about.
Absolutely. All right. Well, actually, why don't we just go right on into the games? So round one was taken hold, and for those of you who weren't at LVO, aren't familiar, there were actually 3 different options for how the terrain was set up, and so I put up on the screen what the terrain that Will was playing on. This was GW layout 1. So who were you facing round 1?
Round one, I played into Eldari Battle Host. Played really nice young woman who came like all the way, I believe, remember all the way from like Singapore
Whoa.
just to play an LVO, which was awesome. Super nice. Their list was base Avatar, couple of Farseers, some Guardians, triple Fire Prism,
Mm-hmm.
and then 10 Wraithguard with the cannons with a Spirit Seer, and then 2x5 each of Striking Scorpions and Warp Spiders. So just some trash to round it out. Um, I ended up winning that game by a lot. It was like 97 to 40 something in the end. And I think it was like a competitive game despite the score, just because like I mean they have a lot of stuff that can punch super super hard. I think ultimately though, like turn one they advance the avatar up, fate dice a 6 for its like melt a spear thing. So it's like hits with the 6, D3, rolled a 6, so 4 hits, 4 wounds. I failed all 4 saves, killed 4 Thundercav, and I was like, well, this is a great start to the tournament. But then I was able to like next turn just punch the avatar back, kill it, They didn't scream really effectively, so I just like wiped out all their screens. Was able to like it was either turn 2 or 3 connect with the Wraith Guard with Ragnar and just like pick all that up. And then like by turn 3, they just had 3 fire prisms in the little like L shape around their home objective, and I had controlled the rest of the board. And it's like, great, well, fire prisms are really scary. They can do a lot of damage, but they only have like 2 shots each. So after you miss a shot and then you fail to wound with another, and then I make my 4 invuln save, you're killing 1 to maybe 3 thunder calves a turn, and then I still
Yeah.
have the rest of my army. So I just kind of walked away with it at that point.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of those matchups where it feels like your opponent may not have really known what to do into Space Wolves, and it's not a bad move of like, okay, well, if you're really not sure, just go up and punch him, right? I mean, go hit him
Yeah,
as hard, like, but generally speaking, I mean, the Avatar, because the Avatar does half damage, unlike, Deathwing Knights,
yeah,
um, that does not help you with +1 damage, right? So it's
not
still,
at all.
so
Yeah,
yeah, unsupported, the Avatar will die, as both of you discovered. So it makes sense that that was one that you won. I mean, the fire prisms actually do have another shooting profile, which probably would have been more effective because it's like damage
yeah,
2 and more shots. But the thing is, you can't link fire that one. You actually, but
yeah,
I mean, what are you gonna do?
yeah. So I think that game would just, yeah. I think I think they might have even said that they never played Spaceballs before. So it was just one of those. It
That's
ended up being a good matchup in the sense that they didn't have a lot of stuff that could punch really effectively into my stuff that punched pretty effectively into them.
yeah.
Yeah, and they overextended in a lot of cases. But I mean, that's what this army does really well. Is it really punishes overextension because it's so fast, because it hits so hard.
Hmm. I also think that in general, there's a few armies where if you don't have reps into them, like it's not the end of the world. Like you can kind of figure it out because like they do things well, but it's all kind of regular Warhammer things.
Yeah,
And then there's a few armies that like do things just out of completely out of the ordinary. And GSC, for example, is one of those where it's just like, wait, you have how much stuff, and it actually
yeah,
can kind of kill. Um, or I mean, like previous iterations of Sisters, where it's like, wait, you have that many dice that just
yeah.
like, yeah. And I think Thunderwolf Cav are kind of like that. It's like, wait, they go that far and they hit that hard, and they like with the lethal hit, so it doesn't even matter that so
Yeah, 100%. I
I can
think
see it.
it's only exacerbated in like if you're playing like proper Wolf Jail in Stormlance, where it's like you have the reactive move, you have always advance and charge, you have auto, like I think it's an auto advance 9 strat, just like crazy mobility, like
Yeah.
where I don't know. I joked throughout the tournament when people were like, "Oh man, like Space Wolves, it's pretty tough. Like I've never played Space Wolves." I'm like, "Don't worry, I'm playing honest Warhammer here. I just want to punch you in the face. Like that's all this army. There has one trick, and that's like the reactive move. And then like there's a 6-inch consolidate strat that I didn't use the entire tournament because
Sure.
it's not super useful because
It's
it's a
it's
consolidate, not a pile in.
yeah, it's also harder with, wolves, right? If you can't go through the walls, then it's harder to use.
Yeah, I mean it's great on like if you run Murder Fang in this detachment
Oh
because you can
yeah.
just consolidate him into someone else and then they have to fight you and then they punch him back.
Yeah.
That's great. But yeah, with wolves that have to go through wall or they can't go through walls, it's a lot worse. And I think it shows how much I know it, how many times I used it. Is I think it has to consolidate into an enemy unit. Like you can't
It
even use
can't
it to
be a
6-inch
consolidate.
consolidate
Okay.
onto an objective. So it's like even more limiting.
Yeah, that is, yeah, not great. Well, good for you for playing Honest Warhammer. All right.
I try.
Uh round 2, Linchpin. This one you said you were on WTC terrain.
Yes. So this one was super fun. I played up against Death Guard Dave from Vanguard Tactics,
Nice.
and he had that. What a treat! That game was so much fun. We were drinking beers. We were having a good time. He was playing a really funky like shooting Death Guard list that was 2 plague casters riding around on a rhino just by themselves. So like Land Raider Redeemer from Wish.com, I've heard people call it. Um, 3 units cultists, Typhus, Lord of Contagion, 6 Death Shrouds, Land Raider, triple Predator Destructors, which had all heavy bolters on them, which in Death Guard have lethal and sustain by default, which is pretty cool. 2 Plague Burst Crawlers, 2 Bloat Drones, and then one of the little mythic Blight Hauler dudes, however, whatever those guys are called, the
Mythilic.
anti-tank one. Yeah,
Yeah.
Death Guard names. Um, that game was fun. Oh, I should mention that in all my prep, like the 15, however, 20 games I did leading into LVO with this list, I went first every single game
Oh
of my
no.
prep. Round one, I went first. Round two, I went first. So this is 22 games in a row as we go into this game that I have gone first. My opponent, he very smartly took the -1 ballistic skill, weapon skill contagion, which just sucks in for this matchup. He luckily did not have Nurglings. Spoiler alert for later, that would become a problem. And then interestingly, he reserved all his predators. So we kept
Mm.
everything was on the board but the predators. And then this game was like a lot closer. I ended up winning, but it was only by like 15 points. I think it was like 73 to 58. And it was a lot more like a tactical game. Like I had to hold stuff back. He had tons of shooting that was like a lot more threatening than the previous game, just because it was a lot more volume of fire that time. And in like the death shrouds had like a really serious melee threat that I had to watch out for. I think though once again I was kind of able just to force him to maintain, like, because he's a lot slower. He had to kind of I had to maintain focus for him on like his expansion pretty much the whole game. Round one, I hit like a 6-inch advance on Ragnar, getting out of the transport into like a 10-inch charge onto his expansion, killed the cultists there, and then he basically just had to focus his army there for a lot of the rest of the game. And I was kind of able just to like dance around the side with all my Thunder Cav and what was left. I think that game was one of the few games I was actually able to like deep strike the Reavers onto his home objective and
Mm.
then just kind of sit there. And because it was linchpin, I
Ouch.
think I
Yeah.
held him to something. I think I held him to a 3 on primary every single turn except the last turn,
Oh
which
yeah.
since he was going second and I was mostly tabled at that point because he was just shooting me constantly all game, he got like a 15. But at that point, it was like he got in primary 3 on primary 4 turns in a row. It's just like not a good look.
Yeah. And I mean the thing about WTC is it's actually I think pretty brutal for Thunderwolf Cab because while you have lots of walls, you don't actually have lots of L. I mean, there are no L footprints, and so you don't
No,
have
yeah,
like great places to hide. You just have things in the way.
yeah. I mean, there's sometimes like I don't have it in front of me now, like the actual layout, and I don't remember if it was day one or day two, but like sometimes the one nice thing about WTC is they'll often have like the footprint go all the way up against the table edge. Then at
This
least you
wasn't
get
one
like
of those. Yeah,
yeah. I think it was day two then. So you actually do you
yeah,
sometimes have a really big area you can hide behind and then just like charge through. But yeah, like there's no big L's. There's not a lot of like less than 2-inch ruined
basically
pieces
none.
that you can
Yeah,
bother. So like um he actually, if he had been able, if I think his biggest mistake was just not being like aggressive enough with a lot of his stuff, because if he could have just like completely jammed up the middle of the board with all his cultists, and then I just would have not been able to move at all. Um, Especially because Death Guard cultists have Scout, which just is
mm-hmm.
makes them like exceptionally brutal in that like their whole army is super slow, but then like their scouts can just like scout six, or not their scout, their cultists scout six, advance, advance up and just like stand there and basically say like, yeah, now my army cannot move and I can't engage with him.
Yeah, it's also not clear to me why you would choose to reserve your Predator Destructors when this layout actually has some wide open long lanes. Like there's a lot of terrain, but like first of all, yeah, down the long edges that's wide open, and so you
Yeah,
could post up there and deny you those lanes because you don't really want to be going down those. And I mean, he outranges your Vindicators, so it's not like he's shooting the Vindicators with them, but still, like he doesn't have to worry about the Vindicators early on. I
yeah.
don't know.
I wonder if this was a case of like I don't recall if Dave said he'd played Space Wolves before. I'm sure
Hmm.
he has, but like most Space Wolves look more like a Wolf Jail list with like a like Stormlands or even like Gladius. I feel like the Sons of Rest or Champions of Rest, whatever this detachment's actually called, I feel like that's a less common variation. Maybe it's becoming more popular these days, but like I think people are just more used to like the advance and charging 9 inch
Sure.
auto advance, just like get in your face immediately. So like the thought is, well, I want to hold stuff back because I'm gonna get jailed, and I need the ability to come off a board edge somewhere, have some flexibility, not just have everything stuck in my deployment zone turn one.
Yeah, though, I mean, a good Wolf Jail player won't even give you, like, they'll screen out most of the board even by turn one. Like,
Yeah,
I know that, like, Forrest, the times I've faced him, like, he doesn't put his infiltrators on his home. He
yeah,
puts them out, so that, like, a huge amount of the board is screened out. So, yeah, I mean, could
yeah.
be. Well, lesson learned for him.
Hopefully, but yeah, I think it was still a really good game though. I think overall,
Well, hey, I mean, a Space Wolves player getting to drink beer during Warhammer, that's a good game, right?
precisely, yeah. Um, Yeah, definitely. The probably the most fun Death Guard game of the tournament, as we'll get to that.
That is, yeah, which is actually, I mean, it's a low bar, but I think, yeah. All right, moving on to round three, Scorched Earth, back to GW Layout 1.
Yes. So this game I played up against the World Eaters. Actually, like one of my few times actually playing World Eaters this edition. And I forget his name. I don't have it written down, but really really awesome player. I think he said that he came second at it was like Rocky Mountain Open or one of the big
Okay.
tournaments in Denver. Like, and he was undefeated, so he only had lost that on tiebreakers. So like really really good player. Uh, Pretty like standard. Yeah, I guess not that that's a standard list, but World Eaters don't have a lot of options, so they can't be too creative.
Yeah, it's
But
basically, do you have Forge Fiends or not?
well, he didn't have forge fiends, but he did have some shooting. He had, he had Angeron, of course. He had a Demon Prince with wings with the
Okay,
enhancement that gave it free heroic.
sure.
Free heroic, and you can double it. He had a Juggernaut Lord that had like the reroll Blood Tithe thing. He had 2 units of Jackals, a unit of or a regular 8 bound, 2 spawn, 2 Hell Brutes, which are near and dear to my heart because they're basically like mini versions of Murderfang and World Eaters, which is super cool. And then the piece de resistance, he had a Corn Lord of Skulls,
Yeah, that is a
which
funky
was
list.
it was it was super fun. This game notably was the first game in 23 games that I went second,
Mm-hmm.
which was I think ultimately good for me. My opponent was saying like, "Oh, like you should watch out. Like you probably wanted to go first. World Eaters, win rate like goes up 17% or whatever on average when they go first." And I think that's true, but again, like I can't go through walls. He can go through walls. I was able to actually like have some control and some staging this time. Not that like tactics like that mattered this game because it was pretty much just unga bunga from round
Uh-huh.
one. Round one, he just like both of us, everything on the board. I think he had the Demon Prince and 1 unit of spawn in reserve, and that was it. And I just had everything on the board, and or the Reavers. Actually, I had the Reavers in Deep Strike, like usual. But like turn one, everything just sent it up the board, right into my face. I like turn one stage a bit. Turn two, he just keeps his foot right on the gas, and like Angron and the Cornlor Skulls are like directly outside my deployment zone. And then he like whiffed pretty hard. He like blew up the impulsor that Ragnar was in and like shot them a bunch. But I don't even know if he like actually I don't even remember if he actually charged them. I think he did and he killed them. But then like the Cornlord of Skulls and Angron are just right there in front of my deployment zone. The Vindicators pop out. All the Thunderwolves pop out. By the end of turn two, Angron was dead. The Cornlord of Skulls was on like 6 wounds. Like most of everything else that I could have looked at was like shot to shit and like charged and stuff. So he was like in a pretty bad spot, and I was like, okay, this game's like going well. And then of course immediately turn three, Angron comes back.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And then so like I'm immediately on the back foot again because he has his like the centerpiece of his army back immediately and like staged up to charge in and like kill everything that I had left. like turn 3, I kill the Corn Lord of Skulls. I like killed most of the 8-bound. I think I killed like one of the Hell Brutes, and then he comes back in. Angron does Angron things. I have like 1 unit of Thunderwolves left and a Vindicator. I kill Angron again, and like this whole time, like my Reavers are like brawling his spawn on his home objective, like trying to take it from him. And then like it was pretty back and forth that whole time, but there were like a couple turning points in the end where it's like I think I like fail. I shot one of his Hell Brutes with my Vindicator. It was on like 8 wounds or something like that. Failed to kill the Hell Brute. It shot me back, and then rolled a 6 while in Melter range and blew up my Vindicator on its return shooting. So there was like that. The Reavers failed a charge. Actually, that's what it was. The Reavers and the Spawn were even fighting on his home objective because they failed their charge out of Deep Strike with their move shoot move with their
Mm.
reroll from Logan. So they weren't even fighting on his home objective. Uh, so point is, super unga bunga game, super just brawly the whole time. Ended up losing that one, 67 to 86. But I think it was like a way closer than the score indicated because like Angron came back. I failed like several key charges, but like super fun, awesome game. Scorched Earth is never my favorite, just because
No.
I feel like I'm always tabled by the end with this list because it's just so in your face and brawly.
So you
It's like,
can't
well, great
even
at the end.
you can't even
Yeah,
take advantage of going second and burning stuff.
yeah, and I think like he burned like 2 or 3 things at the end of the game because I was just like
Uh-huh.
I just had nothing left, and he just had like jackals and spawn and stuff running around that I
Yeah.
just like never had time to deal with.
Yeah. I've had a bad run in with the Lord of Skulls once. I've also like blown it up without any effort like turn 2 cuz
Yeah, I mean it's
it
it's surprisingly easy to kill if you can actually dedicate shots into it.
yeah, it's only got a 5 up invul, so like
Yeah, it's like a weaker night.
yep. Well, sorry to hear that that was a loss. I mean, that's I always have a good time into World Leaders players in a way that I do not necessarily into Death Guard players.
It was definitely more compared to the games that are still coming up, just more of like a fun turn your brain off and fight each other game instead of like and actually the fun thing was everything was dying, everyone was dying on both sides because everyone was just it was just like 2 boxers just like punching each other. No one's trying to dodge, no one's trying to block. It's
Mm-hmm.
just like just we're just beating the hell out of each other, and we do not, you know, no strategy, no defense, uh compared to some of the later games that we'll get to.
Nice. All right, and that was the end of day 1. Moving
That was
on. Yeah. How did you?
oh
So
no.
what were your? Well, what were your? How did you feel at the end of day 1 then?
Well, exhausted for one. You know, all just been on my feet all day, talking all day, meeting people all day. I think that's the thing that like I that always gets me at these big tournaments is just like being social. You're on your feet, you're walking around. Uh, it's Warhammer's an endurance sport.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people talk about that enough.
Yeah, it really is. All right. So now day 2, round 1, or sorry, round 4. Purge the foe. Who were you facing then?
Purge the Foe, game 4, I was playing against Orks and the new Tactical Brigade. Um,
Nice.
this game, 2 games in a row, I had the pleasure of going second, which second in Purge the Foe is definitely ideal.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
especially into my opponent's list, which had like a lot of trash in it. So he had 10 units or 10 man unit of flash kits with like the mech captain that gives them the reroll hits and all that goodness. 2 units of the new tank busters with mechs with shock attack guns. 3 bikers with like the war boss biker, like Def Killer, War Trike, whatever it's called. 20 grots with the grot character guy that whose name I forget that gives them all the rules like Scout 9 and -1 to wound and +1 and to wound, all that cool stuff. 5 knobs with the war boss. 5 or 6 whatever is breaka boys with the war boss. Commandos, 10 more grots, 4x5 Storm Boys, because that detachment lets you get Storm Boys battle line, which is super cool. And then 3 trucks just to put stuff in. Um, yeah, this game was super fun, just because he kept having to throw stuff at me, and I just kept getting to kill it pretty much. again, this list is pretty honest Warhammer. I just keep charging at you, and you need to shoot me and kill me. Otherwise, I just swarm the whole board basically, and that's kind of what happened in this game. I mean, I played a little more conservatively. I had Thunderwolves kind of staging behind the L shape of the ruin on the expansion objective on my side of the board, and kind of just like waiting there for him to run out of Storm Boys and Grots and other things to like throw in front of me. My Vindicators were like in a duel with his Flash Gets like all game because they have a 4-up invuln. I only like they're only AP1, so like they're shooting me and doing nothing. I'm shooting them, like killing a couple, and then he revives one with the captain the next turn. Um, but I think this game ultimately came down to like he wasn't able to kill me fast enough because he had like lots of AP1 or just like rockets are only damage 3, which isn't great into Thunderwolves with 4 wounds, especially because I'm always taking the Feel No Pain uh saga to start with. It doesn't kill me super efficiently. Um, and yeah, and he had his flash gets on one flank along with one unit of tank busters, and then everything else was kind of more towards the middle. So like a lot of his shooting was off on one side in a duel with my Vindicators all game, and then everything else had to like just slowly get fed to the Thunderwolves, and I was just able to like constantly be getting kill more. We were in like a war for take more or hold more most of the game. And then in the end, it was basically just like, all right, my Thunderwolves that survived have now gotten to your home objective. Your tank busters and your flash gets are still alive, but they're on the opposite side of the board, and they only have 24 inches of range, and they don't move that fast. So I think it ultimately ended up being like a pretty close win, just because we were starting to run out of time at the end, and we had to like talk out most of turn 5. But I think it was still like an 82-point win or something like that, 82 to like 80, something like that. Small win, but still a win. Um, and it just felt like a game that because I was going second, I could like really dictate the pace of the game, and just like was kind of in the driver's seat the whole time.
Yeah, Purge is one of those where, I mean, I think you played it right. You want to be, I mean, you have the ability to be more conservative because you just have to prevent hold more. You don't have to necessarily hold more if you know that you can consistently kill more, which in this case, if you're not killing more, I mean, you don't deserve to win.
Yeah, no, I mean my army's super elite comparatively. His army had tons and tons of trash, and like even it was to the point where I felt like really comfortable in that game where I never actually even like I think yeah like tank busters, flash gets, and I forgot to mention this Zodgrot with all 20 Gretchen on one flank. He turn one or before turn one, his scout move was to put 40 something OC of Gretchen onto his expansion objective. I just immediately went, great, that's yours. That's yours the whole game. I'm not even gonna go over there. I'm not even gonna even try to take that from you because it's gonna like a unit of Thunderwolf might not kill all the Gretchen just because there's so many bodies and they have so many debuffs, and like in the WoW they have a 5-up invuln, and even then they're 2 OC each. I'm like not taking the point from you probably unless I literally kill them all. And because of that, he just kind of was able to do whatever he wanted on that flank, and eventually he just like charged his Gretchen onto my home objective, and so there was like a brawl between like my infiltrators and all his Gretchen on my home point, which was really funny. But at that point, it's like I have 10 Thunderwolves in your deployment zone on the other side. Like
Right.
we've traded objectives, and I'm definitely winning that trade because you've killed my infiltrators and you've taken my home. I've taken your home and I've killed Storm Boys and Bikers and Grots and all these other things as well.
Mm-hmm. All right, moving on now to round 5, the ritual.
My least favorite mission in the
Oh,
pack, probably, other than
I,
Scorched Earth.
I don't know if anybody who went would disagree with you.
The ritual is just like funky. Like I don't dislike the idea of it, but also it's so weird, and especially it's that I only practiced the ritual like once, maybe twice, and I think that was definitely a big mistake because I think all like the strategy I've seen in like watching battle reports or tournament reports kind of has like the same idea for the ritual where you can like string your objectives out like along your deployment zone. You can play really defensively, But in a lot of ways, that goes completely opposite to how my army wants to play. In a lot of ways, like in hindsight, what I should have been doing is just like throwing objectives into my opponent's face and saying like that's where I want to be anyway. Yeah, I'm giving you an objective you can take, but like I don't want to keep Thunderwolves back in my deployment zone just to hold an objective I created there. But basically, this game I played Death Guard again. This was the second Death Guard game. This opponent did have Nurglings this time, so most of my stuff was hitting on fives, which really sucked. But to go over his list really quick, he had Lord of Contagion, Mortarion, a Tallyman by himself, Typhus, 3 units of Cultists again, two 3-man units of Death Shrouds, 3 Plague Drones, Nurglings. He had Rodigus, the big demon, uh, 2 Wardog Brigands, and a Wardog Carnivore. Super funky list. But he was basically able to just, since he went first, or sorry, I went first, and I kind of, again, back to what I was saying before, my game plan I think was off from the start. I should have just gotten right in his face right away, made objectives in his face. And because I had that hesitation, he just took all his cultists and just threw them up right in my face. And so he's projecting that contagion range. He's move blocking me. Come turn 2, I'm like, all right, you have all these cultists in my face. I do have a lot of like Wolfen and Ragnar and all this other stuff that can clear your chaff. And then I proceeded to fail 3 charges on turn 2 that were all like I think less than 5 inches into the cultists right in my face. So that obviously was pretty unideal. And then like he charged me with cultists just to jam it up further. I was like, okay, well I'll heroic with Ragnar. I need literally like a 3-inch heroic, and then I rolled boxcars, so I had to wrap all the way around, which then let him charge in with like a carnivore and Death Shroud and Rodigus, and so it was kind of just a comedy of errors there at that point. This was the first game where I'd really experienced the Death Shroud kind of doing the 1-2 punch of the first Death Shroud charges you, the second one deep strikes or rapid ingresses in behind them, so they can then like counter as well, all while they just like continually gumming you up in the contagion range. But like, yeah, it ended up not being, I think, a very close game. My opponent was worried as we were going into round 5, and the judges were like, "Hey, like time's almost up. Like start wrapping up your games." And he's like, "Oh man, we really got to hurry." And I was like, "I don't think we need to hurry because you're 30 points ahead, like going into your turn on like your bottom of turn on 5."
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it ended up being like 58 to 89, something like that. Not a very close game. Uh, Definitely did not help that I was hitting on 5s most of that
No.
game because of the stacking buffs. My play definitely wasn't perfect, but
It's a
I think
tough
there's some,
matchup. It's a tough matchup
yeah.
because he does want to, do his objectives strung out by his DZ because he has plenty of slow things that he's fine
Oh
with
yeah.
keeping back there. And if you're going second on the ritual, I definitely think you have. I mean, you have an advantage there. Yeah. So sorry to
What
hear
are you
that.
gonna do though?
Yeah. What are you gonna do? I mean, round 5 is when I got knocked out because I also made it like a couple mistakes on the ritual and had some particularly bad luck too. So there was just something going around. There was something going around.
And it wasn't just the sickness that everyone got.
I didn't get sick. Knock on
I did,
wood.
but I
Um,
played 3 Death Guard players, so I
there
have
you
no
go.
excuse
Yeah, they just have to breathe on you.
there. Don't let them hear that.
All right. Last round, 6 terraform, and this one you were on WTC, correct?
Yeah, so day 2 WTC was a little different. I think this is the one I was talking about before. Had
Mm-hmm.
some like pretty big line of sight blocking areas where just like the terrain features like went all the way up to the board edge.
Yeah.
This game said I played Death Guard 3 times last round. What do you know? This was Death Guard once again. Um, this list was like I think probably the most melee focused of any of the 3 Death Guard players. Um, and Mortarion, Lord of Contagion, Typhus, Death Guard, Sorcerer, and Terminator armor, which I think that gives them the -1 damage. He had a Tallyman, 2 units of 6 Death Shroud Terminators, and then a 10-man unit of the Blight Lord Terminators. So there's tons of Terminators. Triple Bloat Drones, 2 Blight Haulers, more Nurglings, and then a single Wardarg Carnivore. So like super melee focused. This game it was Terraform. I went first, um, and basically just like turn one, advanced my impulsor, got Ragnar out, immediately started terraforming his expansion objective, which was on the opposite side of where he deployed like Mortarion and all of his Death Shrouds. All he had over there was like his two little Mythic Blight Haulers. So I was like, okay, I think I can take this from you. He responded in turn by just sending up all three of his bloat drones and his carnivore onto my expansion and starting to terraform it, which I think was like ultimately a pretty big mistake because that's where all my Thunderwolves were, and um, all my Thunderwolves and all my Wolfen right there. And then so I just charged in, killed his bloat drones, killed his carnivore, and then had like 14 Thunderwolves and all my Wolfen right there on my expansion, facing down Mortarion and all the Death Shrouds, which really, because they're so slow, had no choice but just to like lumber forward into me, where all those units proceeded to be in a brawl for the rest of the game. We're just like, I'm hitting you with like 1 damage, maybe 2 on the charge. You're doing -1 damage for a strat. Mortarion and the Death Shrouds are punching me with like damage 3, damage 2 on some stuff. I have feel no pain in a 4-up. Because of all the placement of the train, no one can really engage with each other. Meanwhile, I had taken his expansion and terraformed it. The Vindicators were on the opposite side of the map, just like shooting into that combat on the other side. Uh, Logan and the Reavers deep strike just directly onto his home objective and like killed the Tallyman. We're just causing problems there. Like he had to send a unit of Terminators back to deal with that. Basically, it was kind of funny because it ended up being a game that I won because I was just so much faster than him, but I wasn't using any of my actual fast units to do that. Like all my Thunderwolves and my Wolfen were just stuck in a melee the entire game, like basically in my deployment zone. But like everything else just like took the remaining like 60% of the board and just like he couldn't do anything with it at all. So that ended up not being like a really close game. I won, I think it was like 80 to 59 I have written down here. And it was just like, yeah, because I was able to control the board the whole time until the end when like eventually he killed all my Thunderwolves and then he was just stuck on the opposite side of the board and I had to like walk across while my Vindicators kept shooting him. And
Well,
yeah,
that's the
that's
way
why I
you
took
want
the
to win.
Vindicators.
Yeah, there you go.
So that
So,
was a fun game. I mean, again, kind of sucked because my best melee unit was stuck in -2 to hit all game, but like they didn't die. That's the nice thing about Thunderwolves is sometimes they don't
oh
hit
yeah,
really hard, but 4 wounds each, 4 up invuln, 6 up feel no pain. Like they can be surprisingly hard for a lot of things to kill.
yeah, they're super annoying. I have experienced that for sure.
Hey, at least into you, I can't even like fight you because you have the planes.
True, true.
You just fly away.
So overall, I mean, how was your LVO experience?
It was fantastic. I really enjoyed the whole thing. I've been playing Warhammer since like 5th edition. And I remember like I think LVO hasn't been going along that long of a time. But I don't remember when like I started hearing about LVO like in its early days when it was still basically just like a bunch of friends who wanted to play Warhammer together in Las Vegas. And I was like, "Wait, that sounds amazing. I want to go." And it never really materialized. And then like Q about a year and a half ago when my buddy I had stopped playing Warhammer like around 8th edition. My buddy's like, "Hey dude, I finally put together that orc like starter set you got me like 5 or 10 years ago, whatever. We should play Warhammer again." And I was like, ah, shit, here I go again. But you know what? It worked out. Now I actually have, the time, money, whatever, to go to LVO, and I'm so glad it finally actually like happened because it was just such a blast. Like I'm definitely going, hopefully next year if everything aligns again. But just like no, it's probably like one of the most fantastic like I don't know nerd experiences I've ever had because it's just like as I said, this is my first big tournament. I went hoping to just go like 3-3. Going 4-2 is an absolute treat. Getting best in faction, like, oh my god, I couldn't even have like hoped for that. As I said, I wanted to go 3-3 and just have 6 amazing games. I had 6 amazing games, and like that's all I could ask for.
Nice. Yeah, it is pretty intense. So you walk into the conference hall, and I mean it's just huge, and everybody's there to play or look at Warhammer, and that's just one room. I mean, then there's other. Obviously, the 40K is the biggest, but I mean there are other events on top of it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it's just such a fantastic experience.
yeah, FLG I think has gotten pretty good at running these. I mean, I don't love having the different terrain layouts, but I get that this is last year they could do player placed and so they didn't have to worry about it. This year they just didn't have enough GW, but
Yeah.
sounds like that didn't really affect your games a ton. So
No, yeah, no, I definitely heard some of the other, folks we traveled with had some games on some very non-ideal terrain layouts that like were supposed to basically be GW1 but weren't. I think like some of my boards were definitely like, oh, this isn't exactly GW1, but it wasn't one of like the other like FLG
mm-hmm.
GW1 in air quotes layouts. Actually, funny enough, my second game that was on WTC with Death Guard Dave, we get to the table and the train was like, what is this? This was
Yeah.
like it was nonsensical the way it was set up, and like we looked at it for like 5 minutes before eventually I'm like, oh, someone set up this WTC table as if it was GW1,
Yeah, I saw
and there
people
was
doing that.
and so like we had to completely reset the table, and then it turned out like I guess the people who were there before were like, oh, we have too much terrain because it has an extra two footprints WTC. So like we had to go track down terrain because they had like divin it back to the judges or something,
Oh,
and
geez.
it was, I mean, didn't affect our game at all. They just had a good laugh over that. But
Yeah.
yeah, the terrain thing was, I mean, given that my last big tournament was BAO in 7th edition back when there was absolutely no standard for terrain whatsoever, like that's the thing that I always am joking about is just like, hey, like people will complain about 10th edition and all these things, and I'm just like, hey, back when I played in 7th there was no support for this whatsoever. I
Yeah.
remember back in my day missions were at the end of the game there's 3 objectives and you get 5 points for holding each one, and that's the only scoring in the entire game.
Yep, yep. And I mean, TOs are just making up stuff that they think is funny for you to do as special rules.
Oh yeah, or like GW releases a codex and it doesn't get updated for 5 years, and it's either completely broken
Yeah,
because it's either completely broken in either direction.
yeah,
They release a codex that is the best in the game bar none, or the worst in the game bar none, and well, that's what you're gonna get for 5 years maybe.
yeah. No, I'm happy with 10th. Totally happy. All right, so what are your goals then for the upcoming year? I mean, are you gonna do more tournaments? You said you want to go back to LVO. What about before then?
We'll see what GTS I can make to. I definitely like to make it to a couple, maybe at least 3 GTS. I think would be fun. As for how I do at them, I mean, I think it would be really nice to go to like a 4-1 or a 5-1, depending on like the round length. I think that would be a really nice goal to shoot for. I think it would be really nice just to, or fun just to win like a local RTT. I haven't won an RTT in 10th yet, so I think that would be awesome. Um, and then I just also my other goal is to finally finish painting all my Space Wolves this year, because I have a whole bunch of, that pile of shame needs to get a little bit smaller. I think it needs to go back to a pile instead of being a full closet.
Oh yeah, I got mine to just one shelf in the closet.
That's pretty good. The problem is I had a pretty manageable pile of shame that, and then I stopped playing, and then like I sold some stuff. I'd paint some stuff for fun, and then I start playing again in 10th after I've not played for 3 editions, and suddenly it's like, oh, there's new Space Marines. There's I mean, I played demons mostly in 7th edition, and none of my greater demons are the right models anymore. Like the great unclean one's 5 times the size now, and it's like, okay, now I have to get new models. Now, and so yeah, the pile grew.
Yeah. Are you doing the escalation league?
We'll see. We'll see. That might be a good excuse to upgrade some of my armies that are in dire need of some TLC.
It's pretty intense. This one I had done one a couple years ago, or at the beginning of 10th, and it was like 500 points a month. This one they're going breakneck speed. It's 500 points a week.
That's a lot.
It's a
It's a lot.
lot. I mean, it's only
Does it have to be
battle
painted?
ready. Battle ready,
Okay,
yeah,
Valorant. That airbrush go burr.
yeah. Well, hey, I mean, I don't know if you watched the video that we did, on the three identical custodies lists, but I think so. Will, the other Will, already had his painted because he just mains custodies, and the other two, Ethan and Jake, both painted their entire 2,000 points. I mean, okay, like a dozen models in an afternoon. So,
I didn't quite do an afternoon, but I leading up to BAO, I had to paint because they were still painted like Death Guard. I had to repaint my Vindicators. I had to paint all my Wolfen. I had to paint my Reavers because those were a new tech piece, and I think that was it. So that was like 17 models, two of them being tanks that I had to paint in like the week leading up to LVO. And I don't remember if you saw this in me messaging about it, but my airbrush broke like the
oh yeah,
day
that's
I
right.
started painting them, which
Ouch.
was just I
Yeah,
was like, oh, well, I guess I might be changing my list, but Papa Bezos provided
that's
a new
right.
one.
That's right. Well, cool. Thanks for coming on.
Of course,
Um,
thanks for having me.
yeah, and looking forward to. We still actually have not played against each other ever.
Somehow I've dodged you at all the tournaments, luckily, because again, my Thunderwolves can't interact with your Croissants of Doom. You're actually doing me a favor by running the Tesseract Vault these days. So
Yeah, I don't know if I'm running it anymore. Uh,
no, you gotta let me punch it.
no, no. With the introduction of fire dragons, I thought it was safe because eradicators got eradicated a little bit, but no, with
There's
fire
no way those don't get nerfed. There's no way those don't get nerfed
they got
super
to at
fast. They're
least go
ridiculous.
up in points. I mean, one saving grace, and we're kind of digressing before we sign off. At least they can't reroll an Overwatch, which Eradicators can do. So that's a little bit better, but they're still super nasty for 100 points. But anyway, we'll
At
get
least they're on Eldar bodies. At least.
that there's that too, which is not insignificant. Much easier to kill. But yeah, we'll get a game in, even if it's just a practice game, even if it's just a TTS game. I actually want to get some Eldar practice in, so we'll have to do that sometime.
Well, you'll play Eldar, I'll play Chaos Space Marines, and it'll be completely different
There we
from
go.
anything we've just talked about.
Yep. All right. Well, have a good evening. It was great talking.
Thanks, you too, man. Take care.